June 11th, 2020 regular meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Our first activity is closed session. Of course, I don't have my agenda in front of me, so I could be going completely down the wrong path.
That's right.
But Council, if you would let us and the public know what we will be discussing in closed session, that would be great.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. Members of the board and public. The board will adjourn to closed session for 4 separate items. They appear at agenda item 2A through D. 2A is conference with legal counsel, government code section 54956.9 D2, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, and there's 1 potential case there. 2B, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to government code section 54956.9 D2, based on a receipt of notice of intent to sue from the California Native Plant Society. Actually, that is an actual case now, as it has been filed. Closed session item 2C, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to government code section 54956.9 D2, based on a receipt of a notice of intent to sue from Keep Fort Ord Wild. And finally, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to government code section 54956.9 D2, based on a receipt of a claim pursuant to Government Claims Act by Resource Environmental, Inc.
Thank you. If any members of the public have comments on any of the items we'll be discussing in closed session, if you would please raise your hand in the Zoom participants tab, that would be great. Or if you prefer the old school hand raising method, our executive officer is adept at reading those signals. So I'm not seeing any hands raised via any medium. So we will recess to closed session and return as soon as we are done. And for board members, you will get an invitation to move into the other room or something. So hang tight and hit join when the time comes.
Is there anyone who didn't get a closed session invite who needs to be in closed session?
Okay. Are we safely back in the big room?
It looks like it.
Got a number of us. Great. So I will reconvene the June 11th, 2020 regular meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors. And Council, would you announce any action taken in closed session?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the board and public. The board did meet in closed session on items 2A through 2D. I'll go through each of the items. The first one, 2A, was conference with legal counsel. It's a matter of anticipated litigation. In that matter, the board has agreed to resolve a dispute with the East Garrison developer, the claimant UCP East Garrison LLC. The claim was made against FORA for $1.47 million. The claim involved reimbursement of interest payments on a FORA loan made some time ago. And the matter has resolved for $950,000. So that matter is settled, and we will go to the next one. 2A, conference with legal counsel. This is a pending litigation matter. The California Native Plant Society has sued FORA a couple of weeks ago, has brought a motion for a specific order on an ex parte basis, which will be heard tomorrow. There's nothing to report out on that matter. 2C, conference with legal counsel, also a matter of anticipated litigation, which is based on a notice that was received from Keep Fort Ord Wild. Nothing to report out on that matter. And finally, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation based on a receipt of a claim to the Government Claims Act by Resource Environmental, Inc. That matter will proceed to mediation tomorrow. There's nothing to report out on that matter.
Thank you, Counsel. We'll move now to acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. Mr. Metz, what have you got for us?
Thank you, Chair, and members of the board and Monterey Bay community. I've got my usual list of correspondence, but before I do that, I've got a couple of acknowledgments and announcements. The first is simply to acknowledge the ongoing community, national and global demonstrations for human and civil rights that continue. I know that you all as community members and leaders are wrestling with these complex issues and actually rethinking fundamental parts of how we operate. So watching that, I am happy to see that in our region, we continue to demonstrate mostly quite peacefully and undertake the hard work that's involved in doing that rethinking, and hope it brings us to a brighter place down the road. Also, by way of announcements, yesterday, the bond issue was successfully completed. This was a journey that began last July. Actually, the first board action on this was August of 2019, and that's resulted in the bringing in of a total of $30,705,000, which will now be deployed to a large percentage of that will be deployed to begin building removal in Marina, Seaside, on Tampsey owned, MCWD owned, and MST owned properties and facilities on the Fort Ord. So I think that's a major accomplishment that should be acknowledged and will be instrumental in spurring continued economic recovery and will remove much maligned blight from our neighborhood. So congratulations to everyone who contributed to that long process. So to the list of letters and correspondence, I I'm seeing the hands clapping. Thank you. And certainly if others want to chime in on that, it would be warranted, because it's an amazing thing how many times how many little bumps we overcame, twists and turns. The letters we've received, I'll proceed in order of when they were received here. May 21st, we received a letter from the Veterans Issues Advisory Committee written by one Jack Stewart, who I see is joining us today. Thank you, Jack, for being here. Continuing to advocate for the post-FORA support of the Monterey County Veterans Issues, Veterans Affairs Coordination. Another letter delivered June 2nd from the United Veterans Council of Monterey County. Another letter, June 2nd, from the County of Monterey Military and Veterans Affairs Office. And those all pertain to the same topic. We received June 10th, a letter from LAFCO, another letter from LAFCO. And June 10th, we also received a letter from M.R. Wolf and Associates on behalf of Land Watch. That was regarding the item 7A on today's agenda. Then June 11th, I guess that's today, we received a letter from MPC regarding the transition plan. Also a letter from the city of Seaside regarding pending litigation, and finally a memo from NHA advisors. That was the summary of the bond proceeds, and I believe at least one, if not two, letters from Stamp Erickson Law Firm having to do with items on that transition plan and anticipated litigation. So that's all I have for acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence.
Thank you. Let's see. Director Carbone, I see your hand is up. Is there something you wanted to ask about?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that there was also a June 5th correspondence from Mr. James Bogan. I don't know if Josh missed that. James Bogan and Sid Williams regarding a request.
Thank you. Yeah.
I believe that was the letter from the United Veterans Council of Monterey County. Was written by James and Sid.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for making sure we had that on the list. We'll move now to roll call. Mr. Tregenza, if you would call the roll. Thanks.
Supervisor Jane Parker.
Here.
Supervisor John Phillips.
Here.
Supervisor Mary Adams.
Mary's here. Mary.
My apologies. Here.
Councilmember John Cagliotti.
Here.
Councilmember Frank O'Connell.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gail Morton.
Here.
Councilmember Alan Hoffa. Mayor Ian Oglesby.
Here.
Councilmember John Wizard.
Here.
Mayor Marianne Carbone.
Here.
Mayor Joe Gunter. Councilmember Cynthia Garfield.
Here.
Councilmember Janet Reimers.
Here.
Katie Moon.
Here.
Colleen Courtney.
Here.
Erica Parker. Debbie Hale.
Here.
Dr. P.K. Diffenbaugh. Steve Matarazzo.
Here.
Dr. Eduardo Ochoa.
Nicole Hollingsworth is here for CSUMB.
Thanks, Nicole. Colonel Gregory Ford,
Here.
Bill Collins,
Here.
David Martin,
Here.
Lisa Reinheimer, and Keith Vandermotten. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is our consent calendar. That is 6A through E. Are there any board members that would like to pull any item from consent to ask a question or make a comment? Okay, yes, Director Morton.
So I would like to pull item 6D for some questions, and also as to 6E, the memorandum of agreement for the contract general fund assignment for the Oak Woodlands, just to have a couple of quick questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members wanting to pull any of the consent items? Are there any members of the public who would like to pull any? I see Mr. Farrow has his hand up. Go ahead. Mr. Farrow, did you want to pull an item from consent? We're not hearing you, so if you could check your mute status if you want to speak. Oh, I saw a flicker. There we go.
I'm sorry, I would like to comment on item 6D as well.
6D, okay, thank you. Let's see, any other members of the public? Okay, then in that case, we have questions on 6D and E. I would entertain a motion to adopt 6A, B, and C for the moment. Anyone willing to make that motion? Thank you. I've got a motion from Director Adams. Is there a second?
Second. I'll second.
Okay, second from Director Phillips. Any discussion? Mr. Tregenzo, could you give us a roll call vote, please?
Supervisor Jane.
Aye.
Supervisor John Phillips.
Aye.
Supervisor Mary Adams.
Aye.
Councilmember John Gagliotti.
Aye.
Councilmember Frank O'Connell.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gail Martin.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Hoffa.
Aye.
Mayor Ian Oglesby.
Aye.
Councilmember John Wizard.
Aye.
Mayor Marianne Carbone.
Aye.
Councilmember Cynthia Garfield.
Aye.
And Councilmember Janet Reimers.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Let's move now to 6D. Mr. Farrow, let's start with you. Could you let us know what your questions or comments are on 6D?
Thank you. This is a proposed letter to Fish and Wildlife regarding the Nepa compliance for the Habitat Conservation Plan. It was originally on the agenda at the April 17th meeting, at which time it was pulled for revisions. The whole purpose of this letter was to get some input from Fish and Wildlife before you considered certification of the EIR for the Habitat Conservation Plan. So at this point, it's, I think, too little and too late. I don't understand how you could expect Fish and Wildlife to provide you with useful information that would guide a decision on the final EIR certification if you haven't sent the letter yet. Second, I don't think the letter, as now redrised, is honest about the Habitat Working Group's conclusions, which had been previously reported in the draft attached to the April 17th agenda. In particular, the original draft of it was clear that the Habitat Working Group had stated that the draft HCP as currently drafted didn't reflect recent development projections and would no longer be proposed as a component of the federal or state applications. And it also said that the HCP should be reduced and revised And finally, it said the jurisdictions are not going to be forming a JPA. At this point, the letter doesn't say any of that stuff. So it's, I don't think it's a complete disclosure of the basis for which you're soliciting an opinion, should you be fortunate enough to get one. So I would propose that you go back to the letter that was originally drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Morton, you had a question or comment as well.
I did. So, and some of it, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Farrow just asked some of this, but in the working group, when we were discussing this at that point in time, one of the things was that FORA was not the lead agency, but actually, I think Fish and Wildlife was the lead agency for a federal permit. And we were advised by the agency that it could go forward post FORA dissolution. So I don't know, are we asking that the process be interrupted? And I think also it would have been great to have this information as to the usefulness of a certified EIR or not. I'm concerned that we're writing a letter that will be mailed tomorrow, perhaps on the 12th, and what are we expecting before the 30th? And what action would we be able to take before the 30th?
Thank you. And maybe staff or council can respond to those questions and comments.
Yeah, I'll say that we drafted the letter back in April. We asked for input from members, folks who raised concerns about sending the letter. We actually received no input directly from anyone, and the refinements were, I think, intended to still ask the question, but leave the most flexibility for future activity by the jurisdiction. So I think I would say that was the intent, and this remains a draft letter and would be still subject to anyone's constructive input that the board wanted to accept.
Okay. So I guess there's a kind of a lingering question maybe from both questioners about the utility. What's the role?
One,
what are we
yes.
asking for? What, you know?
The utility of the EIR. Well, that was
No, of the letter.
The utility of the letter.
I believe so.
Well, the letter was requested by the Fish and Wildlife Service, because this would then provide them a formal notification of the desires of this board and changed circumstances here, which they would then hike up the chain through the, the higher ups at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They need a letter from FORA talking about what the plan is now.
Okay, thank you. And I see Erin Harwain has her hand raised, and then I'll go to Director, Oglesby's hand was up, but now I don't see it. Anyway, we'll start with Erin Harwain and see where we are.
Great, thank you. I'll unraise my hand before I forget. Nice to see everybody. I can't believe we're here. It's been a interesting month. I just wanted to speak to a couple of the questions. One, I think Josh accurately stated that Fish and Wildlife Service has requested a letter knowing the status, because they do have a process, a Nepa process ongoing, and they need to know whether to start or stop it. We also wanted to, it's a clarifying question. I don't think we're trying to finish an EIS by the end of June. What we wanted to get clarification on is if FORA officially withdrew its application, would that have any adverse implications to future permits? What could we build on? We just wanted to leave this world a better place for you all and give you the options you needed. And, in terms of this process is like nothing else I've ever seen in my 20+ years. And here we are walking this fine line of trying not to be pre-decisional in an official letter to the service, where we all have discussed and had consensus on that the HCP as currently drafted isn't maybe meeting the permittee's wants and needs anymore. But yet we can't be pre-decisional in a letter to the service and say, oh, we're not going to adopt it today or approve the project, because we don't know. We never know what's going to happen at a FORA board meeting. So, you know, we really wanted to take a step back and just describe what happened and what the purpose was in the Habitat Working Group, and also provide the official recommendation that has been made so far regarding the CFD allocation. We wanted to be true to not just what was, you know, discussed, but what actions have officially been taken. So we tried to walk that line in this letter. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any board member? Yes, Director Morton.
So just to a question, in our working group, the Habitat Working Group, one of the questions was if it was beneficial to get the federal base-wide permit, and that was beneficial to some of the jurisdictions and not to others. And so the question that I have when you're talking about withdrawing its ITP application, I don't know what ITP stands for, I'm sorry.
Incidental take permit.
Okay, the incidental take permit. The question that I have is, the Fish and Wildlife representative was saying they're the lead agency, that FORA did not need to exist for them to bring that to a conclusion. That was my understanding in our conversation. And the second question would be, then wouldn't our inquiry be that if one of the underlying member jurisdictions wanted to be the assignee of FORA's application, is that feasible? Can that happen? I just hate to lose 26 years of invested time if there's benefit, but what's the procedure? And if FORA is not necessary, why wouldn't they just be exercising their own decisions going forward?
Ms. Harwain, do you want to respond to that?
Sure.
Bravely raising your blue hand. Thank you.
And try, brave face. So Director Morton, just to be clear, the HCP is a required component of the incidental take permit application. And when that process, when FORA submitted that application along with its HCP, the service now has mandates to respond and Nepa requirements, and most specifically what's happening with the Nepa regulations, or what happened, you know, a couple years ago in terms of streamlining the process that, you know, you had to finish an EIS in a year. They have a dashboard that they're watching, and they need to know where things are moving. So while you're correct, the agencies, both the state and the feds, have said that FORA doesn't need to be the applicant, that this HCP and this documentation, that CEQA NEPA, could be used in the future. And there were a number of different variations of how that might look. But the point being is that we just need to let them know to hit the pause button officially, so that they don't, so that their staff isn't delinquent in their requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to Director Oglesby and then Mr. Matarazzo.
Chair, I was just hoping that we can wrap this up. I think the gentleman from the start did say that it was a little too late, but as a group, we already decided to send this letter. I don't know what took it so long. It was pulled off the agenda, but our consultant is telling us the need is still there. And I think the Executive Director, Josh, just told us that it's been on the agenda, it's been talked about, but he has not heard anybody call about it, particularly in the land use jurisdictions. I know some people may have an objection to it, but I'm wondering why are we spending so much time on a letter that we're saying doesn't make a difference. The consultant says send it forward, recommend send it forward, let's send it forward, and let's do the business of the board.
Thank you. Mr. Moderato. You want to
Steve,
unmute?
You must be on mute, Steve.
You got me?
There you go.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. I thought this was an EIR EIS, and I've heard a couple of times from Aaron that this is an EIR and the EIS awaits something else. But on the FORA website, for a long time, it's been stated it's an EIR EIS, and that affects both the federal process and the state process. So I'd like some clarification on that.
Aaron?
I can't find my hand right now. So just to be clear, because we prepared a joint document, Nepa CEQA document, the EIS EIR, to move this these permitting processes forward. Because again, we're walking the fine line about being pre-decisional, but Fish and Wildlife Service heard loud and clear in the working group meetings that they're now anticipating moving this permit application forward, and that's why they requested an official letter. So what they did is they requested that this not be a joint final document, that this now is just a CEQA final EIR, been prepared in accordance with CEQA for FORA to consider as CEQA lead agency. So the EIS, if something happens in the future and you want to complete the EIS process, then you can revisit that. And that's part of the reason of this letter is, what are those options?
Yeah, I think the FORA board should consider that. Why would they eliminate? It's been processed all the time as a joint document, and just because some bureaucrat suggests you take the EIS out of it, I would need some more justification to that.
Okay, thank you. So I think this has been a good set of questions on 6D. Let's move now to 6E. Director Morton, what was your interest on that one?
So the interest that I had in this one about the oak woodland, one, I wanted to be sure that this agreement as to an assignment of a lead agency satisfied what is our requirement as a FORA board or our directive that we are assigning projects with a lead agent, such as Marina became the lead agent for the stockade. Does the contractual language of this agreement provide for that, to transfer that responsibility? Then the second question that I have is that the agreement, paragraph 6, that if the board takes this action and approves this agreement, the effectiveness of this agreement, it says, in the event the MOA is not executed prior to FORA's termination date, this agreement for assignment, assumption, consent, suspension is null and void and no force in effect. So the question is, because there's two-party agreement, our director will sign based on our instruction for them. Is the county already in agreement with signing this? And if it doesn't get signed, what are the ramifications? So I guess that's 3 questions. Thank you.
Should I go ahead and say what I know?
Yes, please.
I can say that this has, again, been some of the fine work of your hardworking legal team at CAG Law, in particular one David Willoughby. And David's here and I think can speak to the questions. But I will just say that we worked very closely with the county staff on this, and they have been significantly involved in the crafting of the language. So David can probably even go further than that.
With regard to the issue of lead agency, because this is the funding of a study and doesn't actually, at least yet, involve any project, there probably is no lead agency requirement at all. But the contract says if a lead agency becomes necessary, it will be the County of Monterey that assumes that role. Also, I believe the County Board of Supervisors approved this agreement. I don't believe we have signatures yet, but the document has been approved and teed up, and it will be in place before June 30, so that we don't have to worry about that provision that says if it isn't signed by then, it goes away.
Thank you. All right, so any further questions on 6E? If not, what is the pleasure of the board as to items 6D and E?
Through the chair, I move 6D.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and move 6D forward. Would you like to include 6E as well so we can complete the consent calendar?
That's the will of the chair. I'll add 6E too.
I would request that. Thank you. Is the seconder okay with including?
Yes, that's fine by me.
Great, thank you. So there's a motion and a second to approve items 6D and E. Is there any further discussion by the board? All right, seeing no hands being raised, Mr. Tregenza, a roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Jane Parker.
Aye.
Supervisor John Phillips.
Aye.
Supervisor Mary Adams.
Aye.
Councilmember John Gagliotti.
Aye.
Councilmember Frank O'Connell.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gail Morton.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Hoffa.
Yes.
Mayor Ian Oglesby.
Aye.
Councilmember John Wizard.
Aye.
Mayor Mary Ann Carbone.
Aye.
Councilmember Cynthia Garfield.
Aye.
And Councilmember Janet Reimers.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll move now to our scheduled business items. That's agenda item 7, and we'll start with 7A. Speaking of EIRs and EISs, we have an item to consider the certification of the final environmental impact report. Let's see, I believe, well, let's see, Mr. Metz, do you want to get us started and then?
Sure, I'll say the first few words. This is item 7A as described, considering the certification of the final EIR for the Fort Ord Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan project. And your trusted and deeply knowledgeable consultant, Erin Harwain, will lead the item from here.
All right, well, I think I have sharing screen powers as afforded by Harry, so let's see if this works.
You always want to stay on Harry's good side.
All right, how'd I do?
Hey, all right.
All right. Well, great. It's so nice to be here at the end of a long road. So thank you all for all your years of hard work, and I hope that you acknowledge the staff that have worked on this project for so long. I'm Erin Harwain. I've been working, as you know, on this project for quite some time, about 16 years. And I am contracted with FORA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to act as project manager and prepare an environmental review for the Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan, or HCP. Let's see if I can. All right. Okay. All right. As Steve brought up, we did start out with a joint environmental document in compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act at a federal level, and at a state level, the California Environmental Quality Act. So we had this draft EIS-EIR. It went out for public review for 45 days, beginning on November 1st and ending on December 16th last year. We received 35 comment letters during that public review period. And then we initiated, after approval or recommendation from the board, to complete the EIR process. And again, we want to acknowledge that Fish and Wildlife Service did not prepare or participate in the preparation of this. This is not their document. If something were to change later, they could use this document to inform their completion of their NEPA process, but this is strictly for CEQA purposes for the board's consideration. So we prepared this final EIR. It contains all the comment letters received during the review period, as well as responses to each letter and each comment within them. We also provided relevant text changes to the draft EIS-EIR and draft HCP. And it is available on the website as shown here on the slide. And we posted that back in on May 29th, I believe is the date. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to do two screens right now. It's kind of weird. All right, so CEQA requires that the lead agencies make a good faith reasoned analysis in response to significant environmental issues raised during a public review period. So what our goal was to respond to significant environmental issues raised. As many of you are aware, sometimes comment letters don't always have significant environmental issues raised. Some have opinions on a project, some are just not on the environmental analysis. So when those comments did arise, you'll see responses that, especially opinions on the project, we refer those comments to the decision makers, because it's important that you consider the opinions raised. But our mission was to respond to significant environmental issues. And when none were raised, we did say, no response is required. I say this because I don't want anybody to feel slighted or dismissed when they see comment acknowledged and no response required, because it's a very procedural situation that we're dealing with. So chapter 3 of the final EIR includes a master response regarding the funding and cost of implementing the draft HCP. We received a number of comments, and those are identified in that chapter, concerning whether adequate funding mechanisms were in place to implement the mitigation in the HCP. So we master responses are a good way to put all of that response, especially a complex one, in one place to refer the decision makers to a complex response. So comprehensive and well organized. Chapter 4 includes all 35 comment letters and attachments and our responses to each. As I said, some comments just offered support, or some opposed, and we want you to consider those comments. Most of the comments received were clarifications on project details and permitting processes. No significant new environmental issues were raised in the comment letters, which is important, because if so, we might need to respond differently, which might trigger recirculation. That wasn't our case here. However, in response to some of these requests for clarifications, we did make some minor revisions to the draft HCP and draft EIS-EIR in chapters 6 and 7. So as many of you may recall, during our Habitat Working Group discussions, we discussed a reduced phased HCP alternative. So the final EIR also includes a new alternative in Chapter 5, which is described and analyzed as compared to the draft HCP. And this was done for a number of reasons. After the HCP and EIS-EIR went out for draft public review, this Habitat Working Group was developed or created so that we could talk about options moving forward because of some of the concerns raised during that public review period. One of which was that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and a number of public comments really wanted to see a reduction in take under the Endangered Species Act and California Endangered Species Act, and also remove reliance on any Bureau of Land Management Florida National Monument lands as part of the mitigation strategy because of state CDFW concerns. And so what we did is we obtained more realistic development projections from each of the permittees in an effort to reduce our impacts and subsequent take under the Endangered Species Acts. And that also was a hopeful attempt to reduce the overall cost of the HCP, which has been of significant concern. So what this new alternative did is it basically established a take limitation or cap that was phased over 3 phases, years 1 to 15 to 25, and then the third one out to 50 years. And so by really sharpening your pencils on the take limitations, it really did end up encouraging development in those disturbed, blighted areas, developed areas of the base where take would be not as significant as in vegetated areas. This alternative ended up reducing most, if not all, I think, of the impacts compared to the draft HCP. And it didn't result in any new or substantially more severe impacts than previously analyzed. So what this does, and I wish we all had crystal balls, but I don't know what'll happen in the future, but this might be useful for some of you in the future to do whatever permitting pathway you decide on. So as I mentioned, I talked about that take limit, and Steve Matarazzo from UC very nicely reminded me that I forgot to change one of their take acreages for California tiger salamander. Instead of 220 acres, it should be about 97. So UC is requesting a revision to Table 5-2 of the final EIR, and you'll see in the recommendation slide that I am suggesting that we provide that revision to them and include it in the record. It doesn't introduce any new or substantially severe impacts than previously analyzed. All right, here's the good stuff. So CEQA has specific requirements for EIR certification, and CEQA requires that we, as lead agency, that we consider certification before approving a project. So this is a very stepwise discussion that we need to have, because our first decision is whether or not the lead agency wants to certify this EIR. So what are the requirements under CEQA? So before you approve a project, the lead agency shall certify that the final EIR has been completed in compliance with CEQA, that it was presented to the decision-making body of the lead agency, and that they reviewed and considered the information prior to approving the project, and that this EIR reflects the lead agency's independent judgment and analysis. So these findings are included in the resolution of findings, which is attachment A to your board report. And so all of these findings that you see here on the slide are included in that, and then substantial evidence is included in those to support those findings, so that you have a record of why you made that decision or didn't. So what's important here is not to confuse our opinions on the HCP, the decision to approve or not approve a project, with what's required under CEQA for certifying an EIR. and what's required for the permitting process. This is a very procedural step. And as stated in the final EIR, FORA has fully accounted for and described and analyzed the environmental consequences of the implementation of the draft HCP. There are very, it's a complicated document, but there is a significant section 4-1, that describes all the different development activities and habitat management activities that are included in the analysis and why. And it's really important that that the EIR analyzes all of those effects of the proposed action as well as the alternatives. So that being said, the recommendation as identified in the staff report is to adopt the resolution of findings, attachment A, which certifies the final EIR, including responses to comments to the draft EIR for the HCP. And again, here's my little bullet about recommending that revision that you see requested. The second bullet here, again, let's take this in steps. But I do want to mention this last bullet states to take no action on approving or disapproving the project. We've gone down this road, and here's here's where we're at. But it sounds like that the jurisdictions and permittees do not want to move forward with this HCP. So again, to remind us why we're all here, why are we even talking about certifying the EIR? Again, nobody knows, nobody has that crystal ball to know what permitting requirements or pathways you'll need to go down in the future, and that this final EIR, if certified, would allow you to tier off future environmental documentation, which would streamline your process, potentially reducing cost and time and effort in the future. So that is why we're here today. And so I guess with that, and then basically when we talked to the attorneys a while back, if you don't take any action approving or disapproving the project, you really reduce your legal risk. If we approve the project and file an NOD, notice of determination, this is when it puts us to greater legal risk. And I'm sure David would be happy to speak more to that. But with that, I will go to questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Harwain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask if there are any questions by board members, and then I'll go to the public for any comments or questions, and then I'll bring it back to the board for comments and action. So I see that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want me to stop sharing my screen? Does anybody care?
I love those pictures. Let's
a few of my favorite things.
Let's leave them up for the moment, and when we bring it back to the board for comments and discussion and action, then maybe we'll have you take it down. Let's see. So Director Hoffa and then Director Gagliotti, please.
Thank you for that presentation, and appreciate all of the hard work that you've put into that, Aaron. My question is for agency counsel, and I'm just wondering if you could expand a bit on in your judgment, the legal risks that we take by, if we do choose to approve this today. And in particular, if you could speak to the question of, since there's not a project associated with the EIR, how does that affect FORA's legal liability in making this approval? And secondly, in the future, if a jurisdiction wanted to move forward with a specific project under sort of the auspices of this EIR and tiering off of it, is that possible given that we are not approving a project as part of this?
David, do you want to start on the legal risk, and then I can pop in about the project after?
Perhaps I was waiting to see if John wanted to weigh in on this one.
I think it's probably better if you start. I was just going to say you certainly do reduce your legal liability if you do not approve a project, but I'm going to allow David for you to take it up from there, and Aaron to contribute as well.
You might recall that FORA engaged specialty counsel with quite a bit of experience in CEQA law to analyze both the questions that have been posed. I think that their input was that provided no action was taken with regard to a project, there was a very low order of magnitude risk of litigation from only certifying the EIR. And that's based on a line of cases that indicate that a lawsuit really isn't ripe until there has been a project approval. And it's at that stage that challenges to the environmental review process and environmental documentation can properly be brought. And I concur that it is a relatively low order of magnitude of risk to engage in a certification action that is not accompanied by a project approval. However, on an absolute scale, if you do absolutely nothing, there is very nearly absolutely no risk. So we are comparing what's essentially a no risk situation by taking no action to certify versus a very low risk situation. The other aspect of it is the value of the document for potential future use in tiering or building from the certified EIR. And specialty counsel indicated that there would be some value to certifying the EIR. I don't remember if they used the word limited value, but that is the impression that I drew from their report was there would be some value, but it would be limited. And if I were to offer my own impression on it, I might add the qualifier quite limited. Particularly as time goes by, I think that any environmental document that's been certified but not subjected to the rigor of a challenge because no project approval accompanied it can become stale. I think that the document, even if certified, if it hasn't been tested by a challenge, probably is subject to all the challenges that could have been raised today if there was a project approval. So I'm concerned that the value of moving forward may be slight, but then again, you are contrasting that to what is a low order of risk of magnitude that it's going to result in litigation, provided that no action is taken on the project. That's how I would sum the situation up.
Thank you. Ms. Harwain, did you want to add anything to the tiering question?
Sure. Thank you. I think that, the limitations, I agree with David. It's really hard to say what and how much value this document will have in the future if it's not standing up to test. Let's say the city of Monterey wants to get its own take permit. How this would work in the future as you look at this EIR to see if the impacts, if the scope of the impacts were addressed in the final EIR, you could certainly find value in tiering from that document. If it's totally different and, different species or, who knows, this is when it won't be very beneficial. But if the scope of your future project falls within this scope of the EIR, there might be some value. And that being said, when you do tier from a document or depend on it to some point, you'll be subject to that litigation risk when you make findings in the future. But whether you use the document or not, you're always subject to litigation risk for anything on FORA. So it just, that's the way it goes.
Thank you. Director Gagliotti, and then Director Matarazzo, and then Director Oglesby. Any questions at this point?
Really, Alan's question was, actually, can you hear me? Yeah, I think I got it squared away. Alan's question was spot on. That was the question that I wanted to have answered. Of course, I don't actually agree with Council Willoughby's assessment, and we've already kind of exchanged on this. But to our jurisdiction specifically sees great value in this, because everything that we're basically allowed to do on our property falls within the confines of this document. So this document would have to be recreated, and it would have to be recreated prior to us going and getting our own ITP. Now, we were also one of the greater benefactors if we had an HCP. So we are going to have to go through that process. Little Delray Oaks is going to have to go through the incidental take permit process, and this document is a very significant part of us starting that process and then taking it through all the way through the federal process. So while others might see little value in it, for Delray Oaks specifically, there's great value for us.
Thank you. That's an excellent comment. I'm actually taking questions at this point. Director Matarazzo, and then Director Oglesby, please.
Yeah, I guess mine's a question and a comment. Getting back to the consent item on this, I'm really trying to help the process along. And I've only been at FORA for about 4 years, but this has been a 22-year process and had extensive, and I'd like to know the final tally on it, extensive expenses on an HCP, ran into the several millions of dollars. The EIR, EIS also, and it was initially proposed and advertised as an EIR, EIS. And then someone at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service said, no, we don't want it right now. And so the EIS was taken off of it, even though there's federally listed species in the HCP that are evaluated in this EIR. In my professional opinion, having worked 40 years in California land use planning, my recommendation would be to keep it as an EIR, EIS, and let the regulatory agencies rule on it as they wish. It could be, particularly under the Trump administration, that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service higher-ups think it's an adequate EIS. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Ms. Harwin, did you want to speak to the removal of the EIS?
Sure, thank you, Chair. Steve, I completely understand your comments and concerns. To complete an EIS is no small feat. We only were given guidance, official guidance, to finish the EIR was that in March? It was in March. So to speak to that point, to anticipate that the service would be able to respond and complete an EIS, there's a cooling off period for 30 days. There's just a lot of details. So without them having confidence that this application was going to continue and that you wanted this HCP, there was really no purpose for them to spend their time and effort to participate in finalizing this document. Unlike CEQA, future Nepa process could be much simpler, or through an environmental assessment instead of an EIS, depending again what the future crystal ball looks like for your permitting pathways. So I don't think you're leaving much on the table by not having a final EIS and on the right now.
Thank you. Let's see. It looks like Director Oglesby, you had your hand up, but now it's not up. So I'm going to think that means that you probably have a comment for when we bring it back to the board. And I see that Director Morton does have her hand up at this point for a question.
I do have a question. So, Aaron, you put up code section 15090A requiring that we certify an EIR prior to approving a project. And then you went on to say that the analysis in the EIR is the effects of the proposed action, meaning the project, on the environment. So if the HCP was rejected, in the sense, not rejected, but abandoned by FORA, how do you do an analysis as to a project when there is no project? What was the criteria by which the analysis of mitigations or avoidance, what's applied when there is no project?
Okay, let me see if I can tackle that, Director Morton. Okay, so again, as I tried to explain, that this is a stepwise process. Putting aside whether or not you're going to approve the project, this EIR analyzes the potential environmental effects of implementing the HCP, as well as the alternatives analyzed in the EIR. That's been done. It's analyzed, it's there, it's on the website, it's done. The CEQA guidelines here ask you as a lead agency to say, has this EIR been completed in compliance with CEQA? Did you review it and consider comments? Did you, does this reflect your independent judgment? And so that's done. If you don't have a project, and then, so let's say, okay, yay, you all vote and you certify the EIR. Then you would look at the next action to approve or not approve or take no action on the project. It's a stepwise process. We can't, very complicated. It's more, you don't actually have to certify an EIR if you don't approve a project, but you have to make a decision whether you're going to certify before taking an action on the project.
So I understand that. So the EIR was prepared, and this is not a criticism of your work at all. I hope you and I have worked closely enough, we understand that. But we were looking at an HCP. Every jurisdiction, we realized the cost of doing that were cost prohibitive. So we abandoned the first idea of an HCP. And then you worked with our group, the working group, and we came up with this strategy of trying to phase the development of 28,000 acres, or what's developable about that, so that we were going to be able to afford doing the mitigation or avoidance measures in phases, kicking to a later date and maybe perhaps never some of the impacts to 2050 or beyond. And in fact, then we, as a collective group, said we can't afford that. That's not going to work for the jurisdictions. So the project is now gone. And so when you're talking about, you use the example of Monterey, saying Monterey can use this certified EIR, if we certified it, to tier off, because if it has a project that looks like the HCP project, they have a certified EIR. And the question that I have, how can Monterey, that I don't know how many acres they have, but it's less than 200, I think, or it's less than 500, versus 28,000 acres, how do they rely on the analysis and the outcomes of the mitigations where you can place those base-wide versus in your acreage, which is a much smaller footprint? Can you explain to me clearer what you mean by tier off, and what is that value? And secondly, can they tier off of it simply if it's not certified because the studies and the information is in it?
Those are great questions. I'm going to start with the last one. And in terms of the definition of tiering, We talked about this a little bit and we were trying to decide whether you even move forward. And so the benefit of having a certified document is allowing, under CEQA, allows you to streamline the process later. Let's say, just like your, just like the base reuse plan, just like the City of Marina's general plan, you do a programmatic level EIR, right? And so you look at those impacts at a programmatic level. If you bring in a project afterwards, let's say it's a cool hovercraft project at the airport. If those impacts have been, and it's not really whether the project is covered, it's whether the scope and those impacts have been adequately addressed. So if you say, let's go back to the City of Monterey. The City of Monterey has a small project and it's going to impact 5 acres of salamander habitat. Now, what you have in front of you right now is EIR. Remember the whole enchilada discussion? You have the whole enchilada EIR where you've got the worst case scenario, full build out. So it assumes that you're going to impact, right now it's probably 100+ acres of CTS habitat in the City of Monterey. So you can come in and say, oh, impacts to CTS were already addressed in this EIR. I can tier from this EIR, maybe just do an initial study, maybe just do an addendum, but it allows you to simplify that future environmental document versus starting from scratch. You might have to go full EIR. Again, crystal ball, future, whatever happens, the difference and benefit is if you don't have a certified document, you can't do a streamlined approach later. You can use whatever you want from this document, right? You can pull whatever language, you can cut and paste to your heart's content, but it won't allow you, without certification, to tier off that document and do a lower tiered environmental review process.
So if you tier off, so you're the first agency, we're going to use Monterey as your example. Monterey's doing its 5-acre project. It's got tiger salamander. It tiers off of this 28,000 acre analysis of how we can get an incidental take permit. And so they can perhaps do something lesser than an EIR. But if they tier off of this, and they're the first entity to tier off of the land use jurisdictions, then whatever their environmental study is that they're doing something supplemental to it, or they're saying they don't need to do an EIR. They, in fact, by relying on it, will be subject to any claims of litigation about the inadequacy, because this will be a first ability to challenge not only what their city council decision is as to CEQA impacts, but the entirety of this certified EIR, if they rely on it, correct?
Yes, and it might be bits and pieces, depending on if you just rely on the biological impacts. Maybe your project, the rest of your project impacts aren't discussed in this EIR, like water. How much water are you going to use, and is there enough water? You're going to have to look at that in your environmental document, and you can't look at this document because that level of detail isn't available. I don't know how much water Alan's going to need. Director Hoff is
for his 5-acre project.
So
okay.
I do know how much CTS upland habitat he has.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, if that's it for board questions at the moment, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public. I do have a couple of hands raised already, but if you are in the public and would like to speak on this item, if you would go to the participants tab and find the raise hand button at the bottom of that, I can recognize you and let you speak. So first, I am going to recognize Michael DeLappa, and second, Kate McKenna. Go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, I can't tell. I guess I am live.
Yep.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Supervisor Parker. I want to just draw everyone's attention to the letter from Landwatch's legal counsel, John Farrow, asking that you not certify the HCP final EIR. John points out the variety of legal risks and costs that are going to fall on LAFCO and FORA member agencies if you move ahead. His letter makes the following points. First, FORA is not the lead agency, so it can't legally certify the EIR. The HCP stands no chance of being adopted. There's no financing plan for creating and sustaining the HCP. Second, in John's words, the HCP is predicated on development assumptions that the land use agencies have now repudiated, and the EIR fails to adequately describe or assess the last minute alternative 4. And that was just thrown in there at the last minute without any real analysis. Third, the EIR is inadequate for a whole bunch of reasons. It lacks adequate mitigation, its costs are untethered to reality, it didn't respond to our concerns, and it has a new alternative, as I said, that wasn't vetted. Finally, as LAFCO has explained repeatedly, approving this EIR adds one more potential lawsuit to the litigation FORA leaves in its wake. The duty or interest to defend this lawsuit is going to fall on LAFCO and or FORA member agencies. And that's going to further deplete the resources that could be left to them by FORA. So I urge you, please don't certify the final EIR. Please don't waste any more of the public's money. Please don't burden LAFCO with more legal risks and costs. They have plenty to do with, to carry on after FORA expires, including already a whole basket of legal challenges. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McKenna, and then Mr. Farrell.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. In March of this year, on behalf of the Local Agency Formation Commission, we expressed our view to the FORA board that the FORA should refrain from certifying this EIR. Primary reasons for that is that this action is not necessary for the dissolution of FORA, and that in fact that the action may generate some litigation. So those views are still relevant today, as evidenced by the recent letter from Wolf and Associates, as Michael DeLappa has just outlined. And therefore, I'm on behalf of my commission, respectfully requesting that this FORA board refrain from certifying the EIR today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Farrell?
Thank you. I guess I want to address can you guys hear me? I'm not sure.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I want to address the lead agency question first. Just quickly to address why you can't certify an EIS. FORA was never the lead agency for the EIS. The only person that can certify the EIS is U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they understand that this is a dead project and they're not willing to invest in it. The FORA board is also not qualified as a lead agency. Under CEQA, a lead agency has to either be the agency that approves a project or that carries it out. And FORA is neither going to approve a project nor carry it out. So this certification act is a nullity. All you're doing is creating another form of litigation risk. You are not the lead agency anymore because you're going out of business and you're not going to approve the project. As to the value of the EIR, Holland and Knight opined that it had limited value, and Mr. Willoughby was correct in stating that the project that has been evaluated in this is not going to be approved. The alternative 4 is also apparently not going to be approved, and if a single agency acts to approve a project that has take, they aren't going to be implementing all of the HCP provisions that stretch base-wide and involve complex coordinated action by all the agencies. They're going to be doing something small. They may pull some analysis out of this, and again, as as Ms. Harway explained, there's nothing to stop you from cutting and pasting, but you can't tier from this EIR, and you can't do it for a couple of reasons. First, this is not the same project that the agencies will be doing, and these agencies' projects, if they're not a base-wide comprehensive HCP, aren't going to be the same project. Second, you can't tier if you don't approve a project. And even if you could tier, the purpose of tiering is to streamline future review and to allow an agency to rely on something that has been gone through the litigation rigors. As Mayor Morton pointed out, whoever relies on this document is going to have to defend it. It will remain subject to challenge as an EIR until somebody approves a project. That somebody will have to act as lead agency. They'll have to certify this EIR or something like it, and then this thing will be subject to challenge. So I would suggest that there's almost no value whatsoever to this, and there is a significant downside risk, which is that this creates the problem for environmental groups about whether to sue or not. At this point, it appears that it might be defended as unripe. But on the other hand, to the extent that you're claiming that you can go forward and tier off of this thing and we'll get some sort of leg up in the future and you won't have to certify this again, that erroneous notion may need to be corrected through public interest litigation. I think it would be a mistake to proceed with this, given the fact that you're not the lead agency, you're not creating a situation that will allow future agencies to tier from this EIR. The work that's been done can be cut and pasted, but the certification is of no value whatsoever. It's just a risk.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Is there any other member of the public who would like to address the board on this topic? I'm not seeing any blue hands. Anyone seeing any old-fashioned hands? Old school? Okay, I'll close public comment then and bring it back to the board. So now is a good time to make comments and to propose action. So I think Director Oglesby, you had your hand up earlier. Would you like to make a comment at this time?
No, not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any board members wanting to make a comment or take an action? Okay, so Director Matarazzo and then Director Morton.
One of the purposes of this final EIR was to come up with an alternative reduced scale project, which the consultant did. So I think the board needs to know what the cost of that reduced HCP was. That was the main issue involved. Everybody agrees that the original one was too expensive, except for the regulatory bodies, of course. But that was the key to this whole process. And whether it's certified or not, I do believe it has some value in the future should a JPA pick up this process.
Thank you. And actually, that reminds me that, I don't know if someone wants to respond to that cost question, but I also neglected to ask if staff or the consultant wanted to respond to any of the comments raised in the public comment. Seemed like most of them had been addressed, but if you wanted to speak to any of them, I wanted to give you that chance before other board members spoke.
I'll defer to the consultant.
Great. I can't find my hand with my shared screen. So thank you. I'm having a hard time dealing with the lead agency comments that Landwatch has presented. FORA has been the lead agency on the preparation of this HCP for a long time. It's part of the base reuse plan. It's been part of the CIP. FORA has been collecting funds for this project. Just because FORA sunsets in how many days? Soon. I don't think that detracts from your responsibility to continue the lead agency status that you have been to date.
19 days.
Thank you, Josh. I think everything else has been pretty much addressed in responses to comment. And maybe if I may, you know, in response to Steve's comment about the cost of this reduced alternative while I'm here, the purpose of the reduced alternative was really to sketch out a foundation which may or may not be carried forward by a future JPA, or could be a group of you, it could be one of you, whoever wants to move forward on this pathway, permitting pathway. That all needs to be fleshed out. Well, we can look at a take limit and, you know, overall look at what that reduced or phased approach might be. You would need to take this much further and revise the HCP to meet these needs, to know what avoidance and minimization measures. And again, you know, we've gone through 23 years of negotiating with the wildlife agencies. Anyone who picks up a revised HCP or needs a take permit is going to have to start from scratch and renegotiate this permit process. So we couldn't figure that out in 3 months. So here we are. We wanted to put our best foot forward to provide you with the information you may find helpful later.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead now with other board member comments, and Director Morton is next.
So I think the points are really clear that the HCP has been abandoned. And so this, to certify an EIR for an abandoned project seems useless. And I remind everybody that even when we were in the working group, and one of the reasons that the modified HCP or the phased in HCP was not moved forward with as a decision by us collectively was the state of California Fish and Wildlife was saying, we aren't going to give you a base-wide take permit based on what is the mitigations in the HCP. It seems that it is of very nominal value, if any. And the analysis today, 19 days before we go, should be looking at to what Ms. McKenna has also said, is this document, certification of this document is not necessary for the dissolution of FORA. And in fact, what we're hearing is that it may prolong the agony of a dissolution of FORA because it opens the possibility of litigation. And I am looking for this board to make decisions that not only minimize our risk of being involved in litigation as jurisdictions post June 30th, 2020, not just minimize, but eliminate that risk. It seems that the jurisdictions will be able to derive benefit from this document, whether it is certified or not. And I'm just trying to have FORA be able to go to bed on June 30th, and none of us are standing in its stead in litigation. If you want to rely on this as a jurisdiction in the future because you're going to tear off of it, that you can still use the studies, you can still rely on it to the extent that you wish to, and to the extent you want to assume liability for whatever you do. I urge the board not to certify this EIR.
Great, thank you. I see Director Hoffa has his hands up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm disappointed in a way that we are here where we are right now after all of this hard work that has been done. And for a variety of reasons, much of that work is either not going to be done or is going to have been done for naught. So I mean, I'm very disappointed. But if I take my emotional hat off and I put my sort of logical hat on, and I'm looking at this, I've heard our attorney tell us there's very little value in approving it, and there is some risk. There's certainly going to be risk for whatever agency does the first project. There may be risk for LAFCO, but I'm just I'm struggling. I want to support it. I want to help out my colleague and neighboring city in Delray Oaks, but our attorney is cautioning us. That's what I'm hearing him say. The city of Monterey's attorney has some concerns about litigation as a result of if we were to approve this. And so I'm leaning towards not approving it for those practical reasons.
Thank you. Director Garfield.
Thank you. It is difficult to know what to do, but I want to be sure I understand a specific question or specific answer I heard clearly. So in preface, the only way to really eliminate all risk is to do absolutely nothing. And so I am mindful of that. But to me, the pivotal question is, can, in the future, a jurisdiction tier or build on this EIR and the work done without it being certified? And that's my question probably for Erin.
Yes, again, it's the unknown value. It's difficult for me to be in this position too. It's really hard to know what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, I think the bottom line is you can copy and paste from this document. You can make your own and make it better and all that good stuff. But you wouldn't be able to tear off of it. And maybe that's okay.
Thank you. Director Oglesby.
Thank you, Chair. For me, it comes back to, we're talking about winding down, and I'm just asking myself, didn't we have this exact same conversation in March? And we asked our consultants to move this thing forward. We came back a few weeks or a few meetings later and said, let's put the little money that they needed to be extended to bring this document to us. And so now, you know, I understand what everybody's saying and I understand it, but if there's no value to this document and our attorneys are telling us there's little liability, I mean, I heard people threaten liability, but if there's no value to the document, then I don't see the value to litigation. But I did hear a member from Delray Oaks say that it's something they can use, and I think other communities or agencies can use it. And then if they are sued, then that's fine. But again, I think we spent 2 hours the last time we talked about it, and we moved it forward. And to get here, and I don't mind people having a second bite at the apple, but it's not like we haven't decided this already. And I guess this is the day to make the final decision. But I do hear the opposition, and I think they make good points. And I thought they made good points last time, but the board moved it forward to this position we're in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gagliotti.
You're on mute, John.
Yeah, I got it. There we go. I mean, to Ian's point, that it never surprises me at this board how we convince ourselves of something and then we do a 180. We have already we've had study groups on this. We've had counsel write letters. We have I think we've even litigated to some extent this, and we've deliberated it. And in March, we all decided as a majority to take this thing forward. We saw value then. The value, certainly in Delray Oaks' mind, has not changed any. I think that there's been opposition that has been able to work on the powers that be and worked on jurisdictional councils and you know, sowed more discontent. But the fact of the matter is that this product is ready to go. It actually has zero or to limited or very, very low risk from our own counsel for FORA and for for us to make that decision. There's been a huge investment in it, and then to just throw it out just seems it would not actually surprise me if this board did that. So I appeal to the board to search back to to our better angels and how we came to deciding to push this thing forward, and the benefit that it would have to the landed jurisdictions. And I'm sure at some point Marina would even see some value in this to be able to tier. They have no idea that CTS moves around and CTS could move into Marina, and then all of a sudden they could realize, wow, that this has already been analyzed. That would be very helpful. Seaside is the same boat. Monterey and Delray Oaks would directly benefit from this document. Again, we all came to this conclusion back in March, and I appeal to the board, please just continue on. Stay the course.
Thank you. Director Wizard, and then Director Matarazzo.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and Ms. Harwain for the report. I'm generally inclined to support smaller cities on the peninsula because I feel like we share a common cause in how small we are relative to the city of Salinas or the county of Monterey, because we're just trying to be scrappy and provide for our communities. And to hear Ms. Harwain's report back in March that this was not a project and that there was not any litigation exposure on the point of a project because it's not a project, I anticipate there being very little liability for LAFCO going forward if that's something that a third party decides they want to do in 19 more days. So I don't think that it makes sense to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and so I would move approval of the resolution of findings, attachment A, which certifies the final EIR, including the responses to the comments to the draft EIR for the Forward Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan project.
And I will second
that. Okay.
Great, thank you. We have a motion by Wizard and a second. Let's see, let's go with Director Ramers on that. Mr. Director Matarazzo, and Mr. Wizard, are you done with your comments?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Okay, great. I'll move to Director Matarazzo and then Director Ramers.
Since there's a motion, I'll withdraw my hand.
Okay, thank you. Director Ramers.
In the interest of time, I'll just say that I appreciate what Mr. Wizard's comments.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? We do have a motion and a second. Director O'Connell.
I apologize. I had to step out. Would you just repeat the motion for me, please?
Yes, the motion is basically to approve staff's recommendation to adopt the resolution of findings, certifying the final EIR, and I imagine that the motion includes the recommendation to revising table 5.2.
Thank you.
Great. Any other discussion? All right, then Mr. Tregenza, would you provide a roll call vote for us, please?
Supervisor Jane Parker?
No, I didn't think we should, do the final EIR, so I vote no.
Supervisor John Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Mary Adams?
I believe in taking the advice of our attorney, so I say no.
Councilmember John Gagliotti?
Aye.
Councilmember Frank O'Connell?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Gail Morton?
No.
Councilmember Alan Hoffa,
No.
Mayor Ian Oglesby,
Aye.
Councilmember John Wizard,
Aye.
Mayor Marianne Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Cynthia Garfield,
I believe in taking the advice of the attorney we paid a lot of money for. Aye.
Councilmember Janet Reimers.
Aye.
I have 7 ayes and 5 noes.
Okay, thank you. So there will be a second vote. And we have a meeting, I believe we have a special meeting scheduled next week. So we'll see you then on this one. And I will note that it's 4:59. Mary Adams and I have a meeting at 5:30. So I propose that we begin the discussion and try to take action on business item 7C, the unallocated funds distribution. I know that there are some issues with some of the language that's being proposed in the transition plan. So if that could be further worked on and brought forward at the meeting next week, I would appreciate that. So we'll move now to 7C. I see that Director Oglesby has his hand up.
Thank the chair. I won't speak for Director Wizard, but we do have a special city council meeting here at 5:30. So.
Okay, sounds like we need to wrap it up. Okay, so let's move forward with 7C, and I'm just going to decide that because we moved to it moments before the stroke of 5 o'clock, that we're good to go without a motion to continue. So I will turn it over to staff to do a brief presentation, and then we can move into a discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Members of the board, the staff report lays out the outlines of the issues, and I'll put up a few short slides just to put them up here in black and white and color for you. What we have here on this slide is a summary of the categories of requests and potential needs for funding that we have received. And so this view here leaves us 7 million, about 7 million. And the administrative fees here, let me just 1 second, let me get straightened out here before I, okay, I'll reshare. Sorry about that. I want to be able to describe these adequately. So the administrative fees that are included in this category here are $100,000 for LRA administration by the city of Seaside, $100,000 for the Kutak Rock firm to complete land transfer deed work prior to FORA sunset, an additional $200,000 needed for legal services from Authority Counsel's office, and $100,000 for LAFCO for post-FORA administrative. We did also receive earlier this year a request from the County of Monterey for a total of $1.5 million that had to do with post-FORA administrative, including $350,000 for the Veterans Affairs Coordination. We have since received a modified request approved by the county board that reduced the need for administrative kind of records management services directly for the county to $175,000, continues the $351,000 funding for the Veterans Affairs, and includes a $150,000 that would pay for a post-FORA legal and administrative services contract that we are being requested to enter into prior to FORA sunset, and that would be transferred to the county. So that is what's included in this 1.176 number. And as you can see in the second column, this summarizes our recommendation to you. We were asked to provide a recommendation, so you'll see that. There's also this line, reimbursement agreements, is $380,000. These are monies that are covered under two existing reimbursement agreements, one with MCWD regarding the RUAP pipeline. There was, pardon me one second here. Neighborhood's getting a little loud. Okay, the $380,000 includes $274,000 for the to complete the reimbursement needs for the RUAP pipeline, and $106,000 to the City of Marina for the Del Monte extension. So there were two miscellaneous agency requests in that category. We have 1.2 million requested by the City of Seaside for roadway repairs on FORA constructed roads that they will receive, and $1.5 million from LAFCO for a legal defense fund. We also have kind of pending litigation liabilities, one that was announced out of closed session, the settlement with East Garrison to the tune of $950,000. So our recommendation for you to consider is that you would cover the costs shown here in the column to the right. The funds that are currently available are 1.3 million, which stems from the fiscal year 1920 budget. These are the unassigned funds. Since March 31st, there have been an additional $400,000 of CFD fees received. Now those fees have certain constraints on their use. Conveniently, they would be appropriate to use specifically to address the reimbursement agreement items. And then there is $1.5 million that was set aside by the board in a CalPERS reserve fund. This was intended to further supplement the CalPERS termination liability. And so since the bond went off successfully yesterday, whereas Mark Northcross with his bonds away, but part of that is includes a $4 million sum of money as pension obligation bonds that were set aside to cover the CalPERS termination liability. So this recommendation column basically shows that by covering the line items here and using the funds here, we would be left with a certain amount of money that would be available to resolve, to potentially address the miscellaneous agency request or resolve other closing issues that we have still pending. There is, our recommendation is summarized here, that you settle the administrative reimbursement agreement and authorized litigation items, and reserve the balance for final issue resolution by our ongoing efforts over the next couple weeks, and consider amending a transition plan to include this language, which says upon closure of FORA books, which would occur likely by the end of July, any remaining funds be reserved or remitted towards the CalPERS retirement plan termination liability. And this would then open up the maximum amount of bond dollars for use by cities of Seaside Marina. So that's the presentation, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? I want to get to any questions you may have, and then I want to hear from the public. They may have comments, and then bring it back to us for action before we all start to disappear into our other meetings. Zoom, Zoom. Any questions? Director Morton, question.
Can you leave the slide up on the, I see your recommendations.
There you go.
Thank you. And so this differs from item 7Z in our staff report, which showed a gap of 4.28 million.
Okay.
And so that's,
what was that difference?
I'm looking at attachment A to item 7C for board meeting 6/11/20.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I got to get my screens organized. I'll reshare this momentarily.
And so my question and follow-up is that from this 4,280,000 deficit to the new number, staff has taken out some claims or diminished potential liabilities, eliminated what?
Yeah, hold on.
I suspect it may be the addition of the 400,000 in CFD funds received after March 31.
Right. That's right. The so I'll put this back up so we can all be looking at the same thing here. Thank you, David. Yeah, so what was discovered between the time we published the report and now was the CFD fee number. Right.
Okay.
Right. So,
thank you.
Okay.
So the CFD funds are restricted to particular uses.
Right, and so that's why,
so,
yeah, that's why it would be appropriate, for example, to cover the reimbursement agreements with those funds.
Okay. And so then this proposal is expending 100% of the CalPERS reserved funds on something other than CalPERS and shifting that responsibility solely to the bonds.
Well, this proposal is leaving about $700,000 in the bank account through the end of the month. You know, where those funds are coming from. If the 400,000 CFD are going to pay the reimbursement agreements, then you have 1.3 million and 1.5 million. You know, which would you need basically where is it coming from? That, you know, that could come from whichever row it needs to come from, I think is where I'm trying to get here. It's all money that FORA controls.
Okay, oh, I did have one other question. The LRA closing legal services, LRA administration, the LRA was incidental to the ESCA responsibility transfers. So
yes,
Seaside stepped in, correct?
So the additional legal services by Kutak Rock are related to the transfer of the out deed preparation that's currently underway to get these deeds through FORA before June 30th. So
and then that's what that is. Thank you. And then the additional legal services CAG law, what is that? That's
related. I could certainly let John jump in on that, but the basic summary of that is there's a heavy load that this team has been lifting and will continue to need to address through the end of FORA, and our budgets have been somewhat taxed, I think. Generally, I would say also just to the question, and as we've had you know, a number of approvals of contract funds that leave some balance at the end, those would all be accounted for during the closing of FORA books, and that's where the idea being that any leftover could be applied to reducing the CalPERS liability and thus freeing up more money for building removal by the end of October.
So this is Authority Council's 200,000 that they're asking for prospective work, correct?
I believe
meaning
so.
In the next 19 days.
And it could actually potentially be stuff that happens after FORA.
That's correct.
closes?
It's both money that currently being billed and then will be billed after the termination of FORA. There's going to be some post FORA issues that will remain, and that's part of it as well.
And so those funds would go in your trust account and be billed against, and then any leftover would be remitted back. And to Josh's point is any remitted back would go back towards the PERS obligation. Am I understanding that correctly?
I thought he said against the building removal funds, but that's his. That's his
the backfill.
Yeah. So the basic idea here, Gail, is that they're, you know, the attorneys are going to have a hard time stopping work on Wednesday morning, July 1st. The idea being that they will likely have to respond and communicate with folks in the weeks afterwards. So the thinking here is that by kind of adopting this framework, that you would provide for those services, and when the work is concluded, any remaining balance would be returned, or would remain actually in FORA's accounts that would be being managed by the fiscal consultants or who are contracted to oversee that stuff through the end, and then accounted for and as directed by the board could be applied to the CalPERS liability or any other priority that you want to choose to address.
So RGS is the entity that you're referring to that would be managing these funds post FORA?
Well, the current framing is that they would be contracted because they have personnel in place that are knowledgeable about FORA's books and are knowledgeable about the county books and are known to all the parties and have demonstrated competency in dealing with these issues, that they would, there's a proposed scope of work that they would be contracted for that would include fiscal oversight, basically receiving bills, paying bills, and doing audits and accounting, closing the books. And that that was requested by the county as a way to kind of constrain the I guess responsibilities and liabilities associated with doing that work, and it would be overseen by a manager in the county. So that's part of the reason for the expense there. But it's it's a need that has to be handled, and this is an efficient way to get that need met, and again, kind of help us go off smoothly into the sunset.
So how much money is going to the county in your proposal? It says 1.5 million on this.
They modified their request and we attached it in the board report. I think the total amount would be $175,000 for administrative work directly by the county, about $350,000 that would go to the Monterey County Veterans Affairs Office, providing for 3 years of ongoing coordination for the veterans community, and $150,000 would be used to complete the contract with RGS that would handle the fiscal and administrative post-FORA items. And that would be through fiscal year 2021. So through June 30th, 2021, when that contract would be complete.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other board members with questions at this point? So I do want to go to the public. I am going to call on Kate McKenna first and then Sid Williams. And I think I'd better restrict public comment to 2 minutes at this point. So maybe we can vote before people leave. So go ahead, Ms. McKenna.
Right. Thank you again, Chair, members of the board. With respect to LAFCO's request for additional litigation funding, the need for that is quite evident. In the last 2 weeks alone, we have been named in two filings against the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. One is a real interest, and the other, well, in any case, we're already being named in lawsuit and claims against FORA, even though we believe that we have no proper reason to be named as a party. And we also foresee in the future, particularly given your board's action this afternoon with respect to certifying an EIR, and other stakeholders whose concerns are still unresolved, there is a very high likelihood of additional claims being filed against FORA either before or after your sunset. And because LAFCO has an oversight role under the FORA Act, we become a target. And therefore, it is critical for the 60 local governments that I represent that FORA take care of its litigation costs, and therefore we are respectfully requesting some funding from the unallocated amounts that you have in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKenna. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Parker. I just want to speak one last time on behalf of the Veterans Issues Advisory Committee request. As it comes down to it, the purpose of the government is to provide services and support to the people, and we believe this request does that specifically by strengthening the Veteran Service Office, which will help the large veterans population within Monterey County. And at the same time, a stronger office will bring more money into the county, which will then be picked up by the county and the various cities in the county through taxes. So you can help us while you help yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any other?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to announce my presence. Warren Pete Poitras on the phone. I'm free to speak whenever you have time for me.
Let's go for it right now. You have 2 minutes.
All right, appreciate that very much. As you know, I'm a LAFCO commissioner representing special districts. And as everyone in government well knows, litigation costs money, a lot of it. FORA has allocated $500,000 to mitigate the inevitable litigation LAFCO will be forced to defend once FORA sunsets just 3 short weeks from today. Although LAFCO's commissioners and staff appreciate this gesture, we realize that $500,000 is unlikely to cover the costs incurred from even a single lawsuit, let alone the huge number we can expect. With only 3 weeks to go, no less than 8 separate litigants are lined up to file suit against FORA, all of which LAFCO will have to be forced to defend. And the more such entities are considering similar action as the calendar winds down to zero. More than a few sitting there on the FORA board right now also serve as LAFCO commissioners, which means some of you will retain responsibility to defend these lawsuits as of July 1st. LAFCO is going to need a lot more than $500,000 to defend itself once FORA ceases to exist, and every one of you is well aware this is true. As you know, I represent the interests of special districts on the LAFCO Commission, few, if any, of which have any direct interest in or stand to benefit from the outcome of these lawsuits. But if LAFCO is forced to expend its own resources to defend itself from FORA-related lawsuits, the Commission will have no choice but to look to its member agencies and, by extension, their taxpayers for additional defense funding. I therefore implore you once again to consider the consequences of leaving LAFCO underfunded in the face of all these lawsuits already at the starting gate. I well understand this is a long road for everyone associated with FORA, and many of you simply can't wait for it to be over. But please consider what you'll be leaving behind. LAFCO did not ask for this responsibility. Until the state legislature assigned Monterey County LAFCO to oversee the orderly dissolution of FORA, we had nothing to do with the issues that have generated so much litigation. Fair is fair, after all. Please don't leave LAFCO without sufficient means to defend these lawsuits. On
Thank
behalf
you.
of all special districts in Monterey County, I implore you to allocate additional litigation funding to LAFCO. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for being here, and thanks for your participation. Anyone else from the public wishing to address?
Yes, Jack Stewart here.
Yes, Mr. Stewart, please go ahead.
I didn't know how to go through the process of getting, I'm not that well versed in computer skills. Regarding the 350,000 plus that goes to the County Veteran Service Office, I highly recommend that allocation of funds. It has been a successful story since they started the FORA Veterans Information Advisory Committee. The veterans community has a very strong amount of skin in the game here. And I think it's a wise decision to allocate those funds. And I'm confident that under the county's tutelage that and control that they will perform admirably.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you being here and rising above the technology. Worked out. Any other members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close public comment. I'll bring it back to this board. And I guess the question is whether we are ready to take action. So I see Mr. Hoffa has his hand up. So take it away, Mr. Hoffa.
Okay, we've got limited funds, almost unlimited parties interested in those funds. It's an unsolvable riddle. We have a staff recommendation, and I think staff has put a lot of time into this. And so I'm going to make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion by Hoffa, a second by Gagliotti. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say before we take a vote? If you would raise your hand. Mayor Oglesby, please.
Thank you, Chair. As we work to sunset FORA, I think there will be an opportunity to find more monies remaining, and then I think it is a good opportunity to fulfill some of the needs that we have to LAFCO. Just want to put that on the record.
Mhm.
Thank you. Director Morton?
I'm concerned that making an approval of this today is premature. And part of that is reference to we have pending matters that are unliquidated as to what we may or may not owe. And I think those in another week will be more identified for us, and perhaps just having this information and waiting a week is beneficial to us.
Thank you. How does the maker of the motion feel about that proposal that we sleep on it? We'll be here next week anyway.
I guess my concern is it's likely it'll take 2 votes, and I'm not sure how many meetings we have left. How many meetings do we have left?
Good point.
Good point.
Thank you.
If I might just, we have June 19th is scheduled, and we have all the days thereafter with a possible June 26th. But yeah, we don't have many meetings left.
Okay.
I think we should
would
count
also
on the
just-
26th.
Right.
Yeah,
I would just say that as the seconder of the motion, I would not have actually approved a change. I think to Alan's point, we don't have the time. It's probably this is likely going to take 2 votes.
Okay, so the maker and seconder of the motion prefer to go ahead today. So unless there is further discussion, I would ask Mr. Tregenza to take a roll call vote.
Supervisor Jane Parker.
Aye.
Supervisor John Phillips.
Austin.
Aye.
Supervisor Mary Adams.
No.
Councilmember John Gagliotti,
Aye.
Councilmember Frank O'Connell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gil Morton,
No.
Councilmember Alan Hoffa,
Aye.
Mayor Ian Oglesby,
Aye.
Councilmember John Wizard,
Aye.
Mayor Marianne Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Cynthia Garfield,
Aye.
Councilmember Janet Reimers.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And Supervisor Adams, if you don't mind getting our other meeting started, I'll be there in a moment. I just want to see if there is any general public comment on items not on today's agenda.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Mary.
Thank you. If you would raise your hand in the Zoom area or raise your hand in the old school method. All right, not seeing any. Then we have come to the end of our business today. So I want to thank everyone for your participation, and we will see you next week. And in the meantime, be safe and be kind.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.